The sentry is on duty when suddenly the President of the United States calls and tells him to destroy the biolab immediately. The sentinel glanced at the screen and saw that the computer was displaying a level 1 alert. Suddenly, researchers inside the laboratory began banging on the glass frantically. As the sentinel approached, he noticed that one of the researchers had an unknown liquid flowing from their mouth and was wailing in agony. Witnessing the horrifying state of the scientists, the sentinel quickly pressed the containment button. The base began the countdown for sealing and decontamination, but at the critical moment, the door was stuck. Thinking of his loved ones at home, including his recently born child, the sentinel didn't hesitate. He managed to escape just before the lockdown went into effect, and he was completely oblivious to the fact that the security door, which had a closing force of hundreds of tons, was only caught by the toes of one man's foot. Back home, the sentinel woke up his sleeping wife, collected some essential supplies, and hurriedly set off for the next city, but their journey was uneventful. After traversing more than half of the United States, the car had just arrived in West Rainbow City when the sentinel finally couldn't hold on any longer. He crashed into a roadside gas station, and the car came to a forced stop. When Stu and the others pulled the sentry out of the car, they found him convulsing, foaming at the mouth, his neck swollen. The woman and child in the back seat had already succumbed. Before he could utter a word, he died. The local military reacted swiftly, isolating Stu and his companions. Just 3 days later, the doctor in charge of the outbreak sadly informed Stu that the entire town's civilian population, except for Stu, had perished. What was even more terrifying was that the sentinel, who had carried the super virus, had infected everyone he came into contact with. Stu may be naturally immune, and that sentinel had unwittingly spread the virus across the entire United States. A sentinel carrying the super virus drove for over 1,700 kilometers. Along the way, the plague spread, leaving corpses scattered in its wake. When people investigated a church, they were stunned by the scene before them. The interior was filled with decomposing bodies. The virus spread relentlessly, without restraint. In dozens of provinces, local governments are reporting that the local population has died out. Now, the only solution lay in Stu, the male protagonist with innate antibodies, cooperating with doctors for research. They needed to identify the antibody factors in his body to save humanity. If Stu doesn't agree, in a month's time, he may never see any living person other than him again. Stu had no choice but to agree, but both of them were unprepared for the virus's ferocity, which far exceeded their imagination. Upon the doctor's persuasion, Stu decided to cooperate to the best of his ability, but as the nurse was drawing blood from Stu, she suddenly coughed. Apparently this secure base isn't secure either. They were forced to move to a bunker over 1,000 meters underground. The doctor assured Stu that this bunker could withstand the detonation of dozens of nuclear bombs simultaneously. In the evening, Stu had a peculiar dream. In the dream, he walked through a cornfield and unexpectedly encountered a malevolent wolf with glowing red eyes. This terrifying vision jolted him awake. The doctor opened the door to the lab, yet at that moment he was unusually weak. The doctor and Stu discussed his plan to save humanity. Apparently, the secure base has been infiltrated by a virus, and the doctor has not been spared. However, the doctor remained remarkably composed. He expressed his only regret, failing to develop a serum for the virus. He joked about not getting a lot of prize money, but this calm demeanor was short-lived. The doctor pulls out a knife, hoping Stu will help him leave with dignity, as he doesn't want to suffer like the infected. Before Stu could respond, the laboratory door was suddenly flung open. An infected soldier stormed in and swiftly dispatched the doctor with a gunshot. At the moment, the G.I. Joe was executing a lockdown plan on the base. Stu acted swiftly, using a surgical knife to eliminate the soldier. Before Stu could catch his breath, the door swung open once again. He looked at the door in horror, but it was empty. At this moment, a broadcast came on. The voice over the broadcast instructed Stu to follow the lights as directed. The voice guided Stu all the way to the deepest level of the underground. The bunker's commanding officer, General, stood in the middle holding a handgun, but he didn't attack Stu. Instead, he told Stu everything he knew about the military virus leak. Seeing the catastrophe created by his own hands, the general no longer has the courage to live. He only wanted to save the last spark for mankind. He decided to open a passage and let Stu escape, but the general wanted Stu to tell the survivors outside that he had stood by his post until the last moment. After revealing the base's access code to Stu, the general took his own life. Witnessing this scene, Stu hastily fled the laboratory. The researchers had already perished, leaving Stu unaware that an entirely unknown world awaited him. the boy was spying on his favorite girl through the door. To his shock, he discovered that she was burying a body in the courtyard. 3 days earlier, due to a virus leak, a U.S. military biological research facility resulted in the infection of its personnel, leading to a global death toll of 7 billion. Franny was one of the few survivors. Unfortunately, Franny's father also contracted the virus, exhibiting the exact symptoms described: abnormal swelling around the neck. After bidding her father a final farewell, Franny planned to bury him secretly in the yard. This scene was witnessed by Harold, who had long admired Franny. Harold rushes to help. He suggests that the virus in the town may have been created by the authorities. Now, they were the only 2 survivors left in town, and he proposed they escape together. Although Harold was proactive in assisting, Franny was infuriated by his presence and ordered him to leave.
You can't do
Go
this.
home, Harold! I'm not your fucking babysitter anymore!
Faced with rejection from his dream girl, Harold didn't give up. He returned home, polished his shoes to a shine, and groomed his hair to look more grown up.
We can't stay here.
He prepared essential supplies and intended to flee the town with Franny. When Harold arrived at Franny's house and knocked for a long time without response, he entered through a window. Upon hearing the sound of running water from the bathroom, he kicked the door open and discovered that Franny couldn't bear the pain of losing her loved ones and had taken her own life by ingesting pills. Fortunately, she hadn't ingested them for long, and the undigested sleeping pills were vomited out. That evening, Harold comforted Franny, urging her not to give up easily. The fatality rate of this virus stood at a staggering 99%. As the only survivors, they were undoubtedly meant for a higher purpose. They represented humanity's last hope and couldn't afford to perish. He went on to share his plan. Harold mentioned that there might be surviving researchers at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta. Their immune factors could potentially aid scientists in finding a solution to the virus. Upon hearing the idea of going to Atlanta, Franny readily agreed. This decision was influenced by a strange dream she had the previous night. In her dream, she found herself in a vast wheat field. At the end of the field, she spotted a doll on the ground. As she reached out to pick it up, she was interrupted by a 60-year-old girl. This girl introduced herself as the Mother Abagail, claiming that a man in black intended to destroy the world. Mother Abagail directed Franny to wait for her summons in Atlanta. Apparently, these natural virus immunizers all have one thing in common: they've all entered similar dreams. Before setting off the next day, Harold left a message on a prominent billboard, hoping that other survivors who arrived later would follow the instructions to meet up at the CDC in Atlanta. Little did they know the hell that awaited them in Atlanta. The man accosted Larry, proposing to pay $1 million to rent his girlfriend for 15 minutes. As Larry pulled out a gun, the man didn't get angry but instead chuckled, then turned around to glance at his companions. Larry and Rita realized something was wrong. These guys weren't good people. Larry fired a shot into the air and bolted, with the group in pursuit.
Come on, go!
In desperation, Larry led Rita into the sewers. They aimed to escape New York through there. It was the 3rd day since the virus outbreak, and 99.9% of the entire US population had already perished, and New York had completely become a dead city. The only ones who survived were those like them, who had natural antibodies. Larry also dreamt of Mother Abagail. Just like the previous few survivors, following her guidance, Mother Abagail directed Larry to head towards Atlanta in search of redemption. Larry opened his phone's navigation app, intending to follow the prompts to leave the small town. But, inside the sewer, he couldn't discern the directions at all. The unbearable stench and rats were everywhere. Rita was so frightened that she kept screaming. She would rather be caught by those scoundrels than stay in the sewer for another second. Looking at Rita's departing figure, Larry had no choice but to move on. Meanwhile, the water level in the sewer was rising steadily. Larry walked on for a while longer and suddenly came across a bloated corpse right in front of him. As he approached, he realized it was his own mother. She kept calling Larry's name, and rats were crawling out of her mouth. Witnessing this eerie scene, Larry couldn't take it anymore and hastily climbed out of the sewer. His emotions shattered. He screamed out in distress. Rita also appeared suddenly behind Larry. It turned out that Rita had traveled all the way here in the same direction as before. Though they had reached their intended destination, the only exit from the small town had been completely blocked. They had no choice but to continue on foot. While discussing their next steps, Larry discovered the guidance left behind by Harold. As it turned out, a day prior, Harold had brought Franny through this area, and the message left behind was from him. Harold and Franny had encountered Stu, who had just escaped from the base. When they stopped to resupply, Stu wanted to join them, but Harold, burdened by mistrust, refused to travel together with him. Although Franny thought Stu didn't seem like a bad person, Harold insisted on not accompanying him, for in the midst of the apocalypse, no one can be sure of a stranger's intentions.
Stay with the guy who's helped you stay alive these last couple weeks, saved your life in Ogunquit, or you can throw in with this happy asshole and his fucking dimples with no way to know for sure that he's not Jeffrey Dahmer.
Although Franny sensed Harold's selfishness, she refused Stu's request to join her. Even in a post-apocalyptic world, the darkness of humanity still exists. Stu had no choice but to continue his journey to the safe zone. He hadn't gone far before encountering a man carrying an easel. The man, named Glenn, showed no ill intentions towards Stu and instead warmly invited him to his home. They engaged in pleasant conversation throughout the evening. The following day, while in his room, Stu stumbled upon Glenn's artworks. Surprisingly, one of the paintings depicted the little girl from his dreams, holding the portrait. Stu asked Glenn why he had painted this particular image. Glenn explained that he had painted it based on a character from his own dreams. It appeared that they had shared the same dream, guiding them toward a common destination. Subsequently, Stu came across a painting that left him astounded. It depicted a pregnant Franny, even though Glenn had clearly never met her. Glenn claimed to have seen her only in his dreams. Stu was completely bewildered. He had no idea what force was guiding them all in the shadows or whether their journey's end would lead to redemption or death. A virus leak at a U.S. military biological research base reduces the human population to the thousands in a matter of days. As disaster struck, the backdrop of the apocalypse shifted to one of survival of the fittest. Harold and Franny set out for the safe zone in their car. On the way, a man with a gun takes control of them. The man leered at Franny with suggestive intent and then aimed his gun at Harold. In a world without rules, some individuals revealed their true nature. The man opened the rear door of the truck, revealing the two girls held captive inside.
Kind of a demonstration, something I want to show you.
The man was so excited he uncuffed Harold. As long as Harold could defeat him, these girls would belong to him. Intimidated by the burly man before him, Harold was too terrified to retaliate. Harold had been a coward since he was a child, and even in front of the girl he loved, he couldn't change that.
We're back to nature now.
When the man knocked Harold down, he didn't stop there. The beating continued mercilessly. Harold cowered in the middle of the road, terrified. The man is about to defile the girl he loves, but he still doesn't have the courage to rush in. Just as the man was about to send Harold on her way, a pickup truck appeared in the distance. The man fired shots at the approaching vehicle, but Franny managed to knock the gun from his hand. The pistol fell right next to Harold, but he didn't have the courage to pick it up. The man grabbed Franny by her hair and threw her down. As the man moved to retrieve the fallen gun, the other captive girl picked up an iron rod and swung it hard at the man's head. Stu and Glenn came rushing over. After comforting the frightened group that night, Stu realized that they had all shared the same dream. After discussing among themselves, they decided to travel together as a group. Late at night, Franny confided in Stu about her pregnancy, expressing her confusion about how it happened. Suddenly, Stu recalled that just a few days ago, he had seen a painting of Franny pregnant in Glenn's house. Yet, they had never met before. Confronted with these inexplicable phenomena, Franny felt utterly helpless, tears streaming down her face, watching the girl he loved embracing a stranger he had just met. Harold's heart was filled with anger and resentment. With this anger, Harold entered another dream. In the dream, a husky appeared along with a mysterious man. The man summoned Harold to do his bidding and promised to help Harold remove all obstacles to get his beloved. Harold accepted eagerly. The man was none other than the ultimate antagonist, Randall. The Sentinel receives a call from the President of the United States ordering him to initiate the self-destruct sequence immediately. After pressing the detonation button, he seized the opportunity to escape. Within a day, the virus had spread throughout the United States. Merely 3 days later, the once mighty nation had succumbed, leaving only a handful of immune survivors led by Stu. Following the guidance of the girl from the dreams, these survivors arrived at a small town in Atlanta. There, they encountered an elderly woman who identified herself as Mother Abagail, a messenger of God. She had dreamt of her 5 chosen survivors and formed a provisional committee to manage the town, and they guided the town to a place where things were going right. It wasn't long before their sanctuary was shattered by the sudden arrival of a man. The man lay on the hospital bed, claiming that he had come to deliver a message to Mother Abagail. Mother Abagail held his hand tightly. Injured man suddenly wakes up. Like the others, he had also dreamt of Mother Abagail, but he had made the wrong choice. Aligning himself with the antagonist Randall, the man revealed he was sent to deliver a message from Randall. Just as he was about to continue, a terrifying scene unfolded. The man's whole body suddenly convulses. Blood suddenly rises from the wound on his left hand, and his body seems to be in unimaginable pain. This bizarre scene scared the crowd. Countless crows crashed frantically against the glass. The man was convulsing in pain. Suddenly, his pupils turned pitch black, and in a voice not his own, he cursed Mother Abagail vehemently.
Blow your house down!
The man writhes in pain and soon loses consciousness. Mother Abagail realized that Randall was orchestrating an even more dreadful catastrophe. Mother Abagail told the crowd that the man behind the man was called Randall. Randall is a prophet like her, but he serves the demons of hell. They have always been dedicated to the destruction of mankind. It was at this point that everyone finally grasped that their adversary had never been the virus from the outset. Instead, it was this man named Randall. It was Randall who deliberately left the laboratory door open. It was Randall's actions that led the Sentinel to traverse 1,700 kilometers, carrying the virus across the entire United States. On the other side, Nadine, who had just settled down, took out a strange Ouija board and entered the dream world with Randall's summoning stone. Randall seemed to have been waiting for her for a long time. It turns out that Nadine had accepted Randall's summoning when she was 12 years old, and had been lurking here as an undercover agent. Randall instructed Nadine to eliminate Mother Abagail and Stu. Nadine was skeptical when she heard that she would be asked to kill people, saying that she couldn't do it with her current abilities. But Randall said,
I've already found the weapon.
After saying these words, Nadine was startled awake. The person Randall was talking about was Harold, who was blinded by jealousy and anger. Harold, driven by narrow-mindedness, couldn't bear anyone getting close to Franny. Then Nadine found Harold and told him the purpose of the trip. In Harold's twisted mind, he wished for the world to perish, leaving only him and Franny. Driven by vengeance against Stu, they planned to use explosives to destroy the shelter. They then went to the power station and prepared to steal explosives to raze the town to the ground, but they were spotted by men on patrol. Just as the man on patrol tries to check that box, Nadine pulls out a gun and shoots him dead. Witnessing his former comrade's fall, Harold plunged deeper into darkness.